All right, welcome back, everybody. It is the 12th of January 2026, and this is my weekly update video where I go over some of the things that I have been practicing, working on, some of the principles that I've been applying to my learning in general, and some of the things that I have been consuming content wise, and what I've been using gear wise, and what I can recommend to y'all. All right, so I haven't done one of these in a couple of weeks, I don't think. And the last one I did, I kind of talked about the fact that I had passed my year-long guitar anniversary. We are at 13 months now, actually. It has been a busy holiday season, but I took some time to lay out my goals for the year and to think about getting back to basics in terms of practice, because I'm practicing too many things at once, I think. So going forward, I'm going to restrict myself to a couple of keys that I'm working in every week. Now, this doesn't mean I can only work on one song. What this does mean is that I gain a little bit of redundancy in that if I am working on a piece in A minor, I have a set of licks or fretboard positions in A minor that are going to come up in more than one song. So what does that look like in practice? Well, you have let's say, St. James Infirmary, which begins with this kind of pickup phrase where you're hammering on to the flat third that makes it an A minor rather than an A major. If you have a tune like Last Kind Word Blues, it starts with a very similar pickup phrase where it's just one of those. So it's literally the A on the G string, followed by that hammering onto the flat third to make it minor. And you also have this kind of thing where you're hitting both of the notes fretted on the second fret and then coming back to that B string to make that same flattened third hammer on happen. And that's kind of a theme throughout the piece. Now, there's a lot of very different things going on in those pieces, but they have that kind of figure in common. You get used to having your index finger sort of hovering above this first fret of the B string. You get used to having your next two fingers on these strings where they can hit a lot of the notes of A minor. You get used to your thumb picking up this bass note. And even if you play things that are outside of the blues tradition, Ain't No Sunshine is in there somewhere. You have, what else do we have? We have, House of the Rising Sun, which is often played in either like a quartal strum, that sort of thing, or it's often played with fingerstyle arpeggios where you might spell out that A minor, and it might be the open A string and then you might go to that C, and so on. So your fingers throughout the week, if you're in this one key, are going to find these same notes. They're going to find these same themes. Now, this creates both a sort of time-saving thing where if you know you're hammering on that, you're you're hammering on that first fret of the B string to do that, that flat third, that A minor figure, that comes up in more than one song, so you have to practice it less. You're just, oh, I do the flat third hammer-on thing. There's also the potential for more confusion because you might have figures that look really similar in two songs, and if you were just playing, House of the Rising Sun and you didn't touch St. James Infirmary or Last Kind Words, you only have one version of this kind of playing with those two notes to remember, and you won't get them mixed up. But I've been playing that way, and I think there's a benefit to switching it up and trying this way, where I'm focused on two things that are maybe adjacent, but a little distant from each other. So the natural way to go about this would be to include some things in a major key in the relative minor. So if I really want it to be just in A major or A minor and say, C major, that would let me play like some of these kind of finger style pieces. Those things where you start in the key of C and then where you're C, then F, and then C, and then G, then F, then C again. But I've got a couple things going on that I want to perfect that are in drop D tuning. So I figure that's different enough. We are, for all intents and purposes, on two different fretboards there. Now I know there's not that much difference between drop D per se and standard tuning in A minor, but they're different enough that I'm doing two different things at once, and there's not a lot of overlap. So I'm kind of maximizing the overlap within the key and minimizing the overlap between the keys. I'll let you know how that works out. In terms of long-term goals, I've kind of have my goals separated between what I want to be able to do acoustically in general and fingerstyle in particular, and what I want to be able to do on the electric, because I think I gained so much fretboard fluency just from like playing my scales on the electric and working on like single note lines on the electric. So what I have been doing is practicing, my kind of A minor pieces on this. And then I've been practicing, the A minor scale or the A minor pentatonic scale to a metronome on the electric. And I've been playing with some of the melodies of these songs and the riffs of these songs, ripped out of their actual acoustic context and explored as riffs, explored as licks. Like, okay, how does this work in this scale? How would it work if I was doing this in a minor scale? That kind of thing. So that's sort of an outline of what I've been working on. The tunes that I'm focused on right now, Last Kind Word Blues, Casey Wiley, that's kind of that's in A minor, but it involves some very unconventional kind of figures. There's a kind of repeating element where you're kind of using this pinch along with a slide in between the two notes of the pinch to kind of create this kind of boom, 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 kind of what would be done back and forth between two strings with a pick. But it's interesting. St. James Infirmary, I'm working on both kind of like partial chord version of that and a more traditional fingerstyle blues, where there's mostly single notes with usually either an alternating or a steady thumb bass, a couple different versions of that. And a lot of my repertoire that I've been strumming is kind of in that key of A minor, because half the stuff that Audioslave plays, and they're one of my favorite bands, is in A minor. And as for drop D, I am working on Staggerly by Mississippi John Hurt. His particular alternating thumb version of that is in drop D. I'm working on a David Hamburger tune called Red Wing Stumble, which is kind of a generic instrumental drop D blues. It sounds really cool. I don't really have much of that under my fingers yet. And I am working on a guitar arrangement of Ashokan Farewell by Jay Unger. I don't know if you're familiar with that piece. You'd know it if you heard it. I could play it on the mandolin. I do not currently have a mandolin. I do have a ukulele that is tuned in fits like a mandolin. I might grab that at the end here and sort of play that out, but we'll get to that. In terms of the gear I've been using, I just mentioned ukuleles. I think I've shown you one of these before, but this is a concert scale ukulele. If you're not familiar with the instrument, it has 4 strings. It's kind of a cousin of the guitar. And the standard tuning of a ukulele, at least most sizes of ukulele, there's what's called a baritone ukulele, which is tuned like the highest 4 strings of a guitar, what would be called Chicago tuning if it were a tenor guitar. But for the most part, we're talking about G, C, E, and A. So what you probably noticed about that, this tuning peg is extremely loose, and that is a new problem. This is a very cheap instrument, so it is what it is. That will require retuning now that I've tightened everything down, but what you'll notice is this string, unlike on a guitar, is not the lowest string. Your 3rd string is the lowest string. Your C string kind of functions to give it that kind of dancey, high-pitched, whimsical quality. And it also can function in many ways like the drone string on a banjo. So if you're in the key of C, that could be valuable. If you're not, it kind of gets in the way. Some interesting things about this instrument: it's compact. It can sit on the passenger seat of my car and not get in the way. It is easy to reach multiple frets. You can easily do a chord that spans, on the 2nd fret to the 7th fret, and I'm not even really stretching. You can honestly stretch from the nut to, I can stretch from the nut to the 11th fret here. I don't know if I could practically play a chord that way, but it's worth noting that you have that ability. And you only have 4 strings, which means, for the most part, you can anchor your pinky finger and each string gets a finger. You also can, because we're dealing with nylon strings, you can strum without a pick. You can strum with the pad of your finger, and you're unlikely to abrade yourself or cut yourself. Because there's nylon strings, it's not so amenable to slides, but it can be done. Hammer-ons and pull-offs still work, but they take a little more snap. You can even slide with your fingers on this and still get a note. It's a totally different fretboard. Well, I mean, if you took the bottom 2 strings off a guitar, you had just those 4 strings, and you threw a capo on the 5th fret, this would be your top 4 strings. But that's quite a number of steps to transpose to and from guitar. So it lends itself to different keys, really. Because we have this C string on the very bottom, where there would normally be a low string, it lends itself to the key of C. Because our lowest playable string is the G string, it lends itself to the key of G. You can play around in A or E because you have open strings there. Little harder to get to some voicings, but pretty much if you can do it on the top 4 strings of a guitar, you can do it in some form on the ukulele. So that is cool. It lends itself to fingerstyle, like I said, because you have 4 strings and 4 fingers if you're anchoring your pinky and using your thumb. It is cheap as hell. You can usually pick up a decent concert scale uke for like I think I paid like $25 for this on Facebook Marketplace. And there's a lot of people who buy them and then don't practice them, and a lot of people bought them during the pandemic, so there's a bunch out there used. Cheap, compact, portable, easy to play, relatively speaking. Obviously, you can go just as in-depth with this as you can with any other instrument, and you'll see people do that. It also lends itself to some creative tuning possibilities. Let me go grab the thing I just mentioned. All right, so this is even smaller. This is the smallest and most traditional size of uke. This is what's called a soprano scale ukulele. Size-wise, it goes soprano, the smallest, concert, which I just showed you, second smallest, tenor, third smallest. Those 3 are all tuned identically. There's just more bass response because it's a bigger instrument. Then there's what's called the baritone ukulele, which is probably scale-wise like 19 inches. So we're getting up close to the size of a small guitar, not that close. And that is tuned D, G, B, E, which if that sounds familiar, those are your top 4 guitar strings. That you can just take your guitar chords that don't involve the top 2 strings for the most part and just use them on the baritone. So it's a great practice instrument for guitarists. I do have one of those tucked away somewhere, but what's interesting about this bad boy here, as I was saying, this is tuned in fifths. So instead of G, C, A, E, we are looking at G, D, E, A. Or I'm sorry, G, C, A, E. G, D, A, E. I don't know why I said that wrong so many times. That is the tuning of a mandolin, and in some cases, a tenor guitar. So what can we do with that? Well, we can play pieces that are traditionally played on those instruments. So that was the beginning of Ashokan Farewell. This is not very loud. It is not nearly as loud as a mandolin. But there's an entire tradition of blues that was played on mandolin, like Yank Rochelle. If you look him up, he's got a couple albums out there where he's part of a string band, and he is the primary melodic force in that band, playing the mandolin. It kind of lends itself to some shuffly kind of boogie woogie type things, like that sort of thing. So it's much more shuffle riff driven, not so much chordal. But what's cool about that is you can create that kind of movement. There's ragtime pieces, boogie woogie pieces, blues pieces, all of that out there for the mandolin, and for anything else it's tuned in fifths, which could be a tenor guitar, which I would also like to own at some point. Could be an actual mandolin. It could be other members of the mandolin family, like the octave mandolin, mandocello, would love to have some of those in the stable as well. So that is kind of my instrument of the week and my pitch for checking out the ukulele if you haven't already. My piece of gear for the week, where is it? Oh, this particular pick has been very kind to me. Let's see. This is Dunlop Prime Tone 1.5, and this is just the rounded corner triangle. Not very flexible, fairly stiff, easy to hold on to because it has a texture to it. And I find that it lends itself very well to being a do-everything guitar pick. So for single note lines, it's sharp enough to get in there and transition smoothly between that and chords. If you want to just play scales up and down the fretboard. That was not my best performance, but this is a pick that lends itself to strumming and individual picking, and it's not too big, it's not too small, it's a little bit transparent. I can see myself through it, but not so transparent that you're gonna lose it on the floor. These aren't cheap. I think 12 bucks for a 3-pack. I've had them for a while. I will get more someday when I am making money again, but that might be a ways off. So, been enjoying that a lot lately. So that's it for now. I have just released an episode 2 of our Delta Blues deep dive, where I go into more of the history of where Charlie Patton came from, who discovered him, where he was playing before he was discovered, that sort of thing. We are also going to talk about the things I learned in my first year of playing this week. I know I've owed you that for a while. That's coming. We are also going to talk about at least one other sub-style. I think I might do a Piedmont Blues deep dive here soon. That has been overdue. I think that is the other big stream of stuff I have been playing. We're also going to talk about Texas blues, hill country blues, all that as well in the future. So bear with me here. Thank you very much for your time. Have a wonderful day.